Okay, I think we're live now.
Awesome.
I'm not mistaken. If there's anyone in the chat, please say hello there just to confirm that you can hear me. Hello, Monkey. Monkey says check. All right, good. Thank you for that.
And just so everybody knows, I cannot see any of the chat. I don't know that I'm meant to, but I'm just pointing that out. So if somebody's trying to ask me a question or something, obviously Pundit will have to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Don't worry. I will communicate any questions that come up. All right, so let's wait a little while to see if we can get some people in here. But thank you to everybody who's here already. There's only 5 of you, but that's a start, I guess. Tonight, this is not like as usual the RPG Pundit encounter. I decided that because my next book is according to Chris, is going to be ready fairly shortly.
Very soon.
It would be interesting to have a live stream where we could talk about that. Mm-hmm. We'll also probably talk a little bit about what's going on in the gaming industry. And if people are interested, we might talk a little bit about my next project, which there's no guarantee yet, but there's a good chance that Mad Scribe will also end up publishing. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll be on here for a bit. And damn it, I got something in my glasses. All right.
Yeah. Just, without getting too much in the weeds with it, I think there's a definite chance that the sci-fi book could be done this week. So,
right.
By next weekend.
Yeah, but when you say be done this week, that won't mean that
that won't mean for sale. That just means that it'll be done for Pundit's approval.
Because we'll still need to make sure that drive-through got it right in the whole
right
all of that, and then
the whole drive-through process is going to take at least another 2 weeks. I'm crossing my fingers.
I need to look through the I haven't yet seen the completed copy of yours. Like, I'd have to look at that.
Right.
Take it to drive-through. So odds are that it's going to be available either, if we're lucky, tremendously lucky, early next month, or or else somewhat later next month,
right. Yeah, I'm gonna speak it into existence that we're within say a month or a month and a half here, we're gonna have a book on the shelf. So
I think so. I mean, it's unlikely there's going to be any big problems with that.
Yeah. Now, getting the book to you is probably a bigger problem, but we'll work that out.
I mean, if I can confirm if you send me a PDF, right, which is what you usually do. First, send me the PDF, and if I see that everything looks good, right, the text is good, I don't spot any mistakes, or whatever, I think the art looks great, whatever, then you can go on and send for the draft or whatever in drive-through.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just get my books whenever I get my books. I mean, I always end up getting my books later than at least some of the people who buy my books because
I don't know why it's such a big deal. Like the postal service down south of the border there must really be terrible, because I think, what was it? The longest time it took was what, 2 or 3 months to get you a book?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It's I don't know, like, within the let's say the spectrum of South American countries,
mm-hmm.
South American third world countries, Uruguay usually ranks pretty high on a lot of different subjects. Hey, Diversity and Dragon, good to see you. Like, it's got a relatively very high level of education. It has a relatively low poverty rate, relatively low crime rate.
Yeah.
All of that sort of thing. But it does have an enormous problem with a absolutely, how would you call it, ultra privileged bureaucratic class, and combine that
kind of see that
with the leftist public sector unions, that are just insane. They're just crazy. And that is what slows down all productivity in the country. And it is also, and they're also blatantly corrupt in that area, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't usually private business is not nearly as corrupt as
public. That kind of goes hand in hand with all those places. I mean, I lived in Nicaragua.
Statistically, Uruguay is the second worst mail service.
Oh yeah.
In all the Americas. Only Haiti is worse than Uruguay, and that's like insane, right? Because in between that, you got like places like Bolivia or Venezuela. I don't know. Maybe Venezuela might be as bad now because I'm working on a list from a few years ago, right? But there are a lot of countries that are much more shithole countries, right? Guyana or something like that.
Like how socialist
Uruguay was once called the Switzerland of South America, right? But
how socialist is Uruguay?
Well, Uruguay is funny because it's, for example, it's now going. There's a very good chance that by the end of this year, Uruguay will be the only country with a left-wing government in all of South America, right? All the other ones have been falling like dominoes.
Really? Wow.
Part of the reason for that was Javier Milei and Bukele, right? And part of it was also when Doge discovered the USAID thing and put an end to it. Mm-hmm. Because, and this is just insane, right? When you hear it. When it turned out that USAID was giving millions of dollars, like millions and millions of dollars every year to pretty much every left-wing party in South America for decades. At the same time that other parts of the American government were trying to overthrow those governments, right? So it's just madness what they were doing, right? And now all of a sudden, all of these parties have lost these just free millions of dollars that the U.S. government, that your salary has been giving all of these left-wing parties for probably as long as you've been alive, and now they're losing because they don't have any money, right? So it's very nice, but Uruguay, out of all the left-wing countries, all the countries that have had left-wing governments, it has had the least worst socialist party, right? Because when you look at obviously Cuba, Venezuela with Maduro, the Kirchners in Argentina, right? Boric and what is it, the Partido de Trabajadores in Brazil, right? All of these terrible, terrible guys, right? The Lula da Silva, that was it. Lula da Silva, and all of them that just destroyed their countries. Like Uruguay never has one of those kinds of governments. It has a government that is completely statist, right? That it works and blatantly only for the benefit of the public employee class, and they steal, but not as much as other countries steal, right? They blatantly steal money, but they know exactly what the stopping point is, right? And so because of that, there is no impetus to overthrow them the way that there has been in other countries, which is why they are more resilient in that sense. But there are certain areas, like the areas of corruption, like for example, the water system garbage disposal, and the mail, right? The mail is the worst one of all. Like literally anything you send by regular mail will be stolen, and they will do nothing about it, right? Like they'll be stolen by the guys who are supposed to bring you.
It's literally run by like the mafia
on eBay, right? Like you'll see like the lamp you ordered from somewhere else, and it's the one of a kind, right? It was handmade. It's for sale on the equivalent, the Uruguayan equivalent of eBay.
Oh, wow.
Mercado Libre, it's called, right? And it's just the guys.
I thought you'd say
treat international mail as just like free stuff that they're going to take, and they're going to take all of it, right? Like there was a few years ago, they didn't bother to steal books, but because most of them are basically illiterate anyways, right? But apparently at some point they realized that other people might buy those books. So as soon as Mercado Libre had enough deal with books, they started putting it on there too, right? And so now the only way to get me a physical book to review is if you send it by like DHL or something like that, right? Because that's that they must have bribed the Uruguayan government to say, well, you don't mess with us, right? We're going to ship stuff to Uruguay. Anything that we ship has to get through, right? Or else you're
you essentially have to use organized crime to get it there.
Exactly. It's a criminal enterprise.
And then you go to the police station to make a complaint about your lamp, and you see your beautiful lamp over in the corner. Yeah,
it's quite
lighting up the police station. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. So, all right, what time are we at here? It is 11. We're 11 minutes in. How many people we got? 17 people. So I guess that was one way to kill some time while people join the chat.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't have time for any of my lengthy stories, but I will say that I did live in both Nicaragua and Guatemala back in the 90s. And in Guatemala, it was during the Civil War, so it was pretty rough in those areas. And crime was the norm, and everybody was corrupt, and you just knew that you had to pay, a couple of hundred or 1,000 pesos to somebody just to get something done, and it was how it was, But
right. So those are examples of two countries that are much worse in almost all general areas than Uruguay, but not in the mail service. Their mail service is better than Uruguay's.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
They might cut your hands off and mail them back to America, but your mail will get there on time.
Yeah. It's fucking crazy. DHL probably has more money than Uruguay. Yeah, I don't know about that, but it's possible. I mean, Uruguay's not a very big country, and it's not a very rich country.
For real, in Guatemala, in anything that was worth protecting, and they had like in Guatemala City, there were Americanized kind of like restaurants and chains and things like that. But they literally would have armed, I guess you could call them security guards, but they're just guys dressed in destitute looking, plain clothes, hanging off the sides of, like the mail truck with Uzis, and if you tried to steal the mail, they'd shoot you. Same thing with
it's never like that in Uruguay, right? Like,
it was crazy.
There are some bad neighborhoods, right? Usually in the periphery of the city, but
I saw
you don't see like armed men going through the streets and crime.
Everybody
the Europeans always complain about it.
Everybody carried a weapon in Guatemala. Every person on the street has a machine gun or a machete or something. So, but I saw a turf war between Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and they pulled up at this intersection, and they were both driving tankers. One's full of Pepsi and one's full of Coke. And they literally had about 12 guys hanging off of each of the trucks with machine guns. And they got into a firefight in the middle of the fucking road over who was going to sell Coke or Pepsi to these businesses. And it was just like, it felt like Mad Max. I mean, it was pretty...
Ironically, in Uruguay, the police are very good, right? Even though a lot of Uruguayans don't think so, they're very good. They're sometimes hamstringed by what the law allows, right? But I only had, in all the years I've been here, there was only one incident of crime that happened to me directly, right? Which was that on a given night, it's actually a holiday here. It's called Nostalgia Night, where people, they have weird holidays in Uruguay. People go out to bars and play oldies music, right, and stuff like that. It's just an excuse to get drunk, right? And
seems like it'd be a cool holiday here, like everything's 80s night.
It was sort of like St. Patrick's Day or something like that, right? Yeah. So that night, sometime like 2 a.m. or something, I hear some noises outside in the courtyard of the block that I'm in, right? And I go out and I see that the propane tank that it attaches in a little box on the outside of my house that connects to the propane for my stove and that, right? It apparently had been taken, like literally the 13 kilo propane gas thing, right? Like some guy just walked off with it, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm never going to see that again, right? So, but okay, well, you know what? I should do the civic duty. I'm going to call the police, right? I call the police. And in like, they come like super fast, right? Because there's actually one in like each neighborhood. So they're never more than like 6 blocks away from anywhere that there could be a problem, right? So they show up super fast. They ask me what I saw. I said, well, I had this. It's gone. Somebody took it. I didn't really see much. I thought I saw some person turning the corner just as I came out. And they said, okay, well, we'll let you know, right? And I'm like, yeah, you're going to let me know, right? And like 40 minutes later, less than 40 minutes later, I get a call. Yeah, we got the propane tank back. I'm like, really? How did you do that, right? And I'm like, well, we drove around looking for a guy carrying a propane tank. Okay, I kind of, I guess that makes sense. But
they won't even do that here. I mean,
yeah, but a lot of other people I know who've actually dealt with the police in this country, they've been really surprised because they don't like. Well, one of my gamers would come to play with. He'd drive a motorcycle to get to my game, but there was, because at that time that it wasn't when I was living here. I was living in an apartment. I didn't have any parking, and there was no way he could get the motorcycle up to my apartment. So he had left it at the entrance of the apartment, right? And lo and behold, one day it was stolen, right? And he was just totally distraught. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. It was his means of transportation, right? And again, one of the other gamers called the local police division, and they showed up pretty quickly. And before the end of the night, they said, we recovered your motorcycle, So like they're really great. The law, that part of the law of the legal system works quite well in Uruguay.
Man,
but they can't seem to arrest the mailman who keeps stealing all of our foreign packages, right? It's literally impossible these days. All right, so I guess we should probably get started. Like we're still 16 people here. Unless somebody wants to, if you guys really want us to keep talking about the conditions of third world countries, go.
Yeah,
just let me know.
Look, I've lived all over the world, man. I got plenty of stories, but
well,
it'd be a whole different kind of show, though.
I've been in a lot of places myself, but not everywhere, I guess. But
India was the craziest, actually, but. That would be a 2-hour thing on its own, so we'll leave that for some other time.
I've been in Europe and the Americas. All right, so like today, this isn't because you were already on a RPG Pundit Encounter live stream, right? So
yeah.
And so this isn't a repeat of that, right? Today, I just because the person that I was going to get this time canceled, I said, and because coincidentally at the same time you told me, the game is almost ready, like
right.
I figured, well, maybe this is a good moment to do something like this, so that the people that are interested in finding out what's going to be going on with Sons of Heaven will have a better notion of it as of now. So I'm pretty much ready. I'll say for anybody who's watching, in case there's some, I mean, I'm guessing most of you guys are fans and have probably already heard of it, but in case you haven't, Sons of Heaven is the next RPG of mine that's going to come out from Mad Scribe Press. And it is a science fiction RPG, which I know is a bit different for me than typically people associate me with like history RPGs. But I have done a modern RPG, which is the Invisible College, and I've done a science fiction RPG that's called Star Adventurer, although that one was just a rule book. But it's from that rule book that I'm going to make, or that I have made actually, but that Chris is going to finish publishing, is a complete campaign setting plus rules all in one that has a specific style to it. And it is an OSR game, of course. If you know Star Adventure, you know that it's based on OSR rules. And so it's compatible with all other OSR products. And it is a game where what I didn't want it to be was just another Star Trek or Star Wars or something along those lines, right? So I wanted to have something that was a bit more unorthodox, but I also really, really wanted it to be really OSR, okay? Because there are a number of sci-fi games available of all kinds, whether OSR or not, and a lot of them are great. They're just fantastic science fiction games out there, from like all the way from Traveler onwards, right? Or even Metamorphosis Alpha, anything from there onwards. There have been great sci-fi games. But because my point of view on this is that you want to make sure that you have, if you're going to be using an OSR system, you want it to have that same style of kind of old school gaming that you would have in, say, a fantasy version.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to do was to make the game have a number of ways that you could play it. It's an open sandbox, right? It's here are the different forces and powers in the galaxy, and you could decide as the DM how they would operate, and you can decide as the DM plus players what type of campaign you want to run. So there are many different kinds of campaigns you can run, and there's going to be some of them that are going to be more involved, let's say, in the kind of domain level politics of the thing. If you want to be part of like the effort to rebuild the human confederation, or you can do it as a very, very old school game where essentially you guys are either raiders or traders or mercenaries or planet hoppers that are going from place to place in the ruins of the human confederation, looking to get treasure, right, and to make money and to rediscover these planets that have now been cut off for hundreds of years.
Right.
So,
and if I can interject, that's actually one of my favorite aspects of the game. I think you've done such a good job putting this together in a way that is like an old school sandbox. It's a little. It reminds me a little bit of Star Frontiers, just as far as like the veneer of you've got this sci-fi, kind of a setting with a lot of fantasy elements. Yeah. And you do have different alien races, and there's the remnants of a, kind of a confederation and that sort of thing. But I really do like the aspect that you just lay everything out, and people can kind of pick and choose where they want to go. And there's plenty of essentially dungeons to explore because there's all these worlds that had collapsed and certainly lost all their government support and whatnot. But you may get to a world where everybody's completely dead, or maybe there's a world where the government's fallen and it's been taken over by a despot or whatever. and they live like a post-apocalyptic, kind of people. So, it's interesting, and I think you've got a lot of different things in the game. You've got alien robots, and there's even some Cthulhu-esque, kind of things over on one corner of the map. You've got all these different alien races that are playable too, that are very interesting. And I just, I really, I commend you for having put this together, because I got to tell you, when I looked at it, it was so much more involved than I thought at first. And
yeah,
with Star Frontiers, I've only seen, not Star Frontiers. What was the one that you
Star Adventurer?
Star Adventurer.
That's a little book. It's just like 30 pages.
I only read a couple of pages out of that one, to be honest.
It's just the mechanics, right? It has no frills, right?
This is like way more involved than that. Yeah. And I quite like it, actually. I was telling my wife the other day I might end up running this, for some friends or something. So good job.
One of the things, everybody who buys my games at least knows that I love the concept of the clockmaker god being the DM, right? Not an interventionist director, right? And one of the best ways to do that is to facilitate people to do that is if you can make use of random generators. And so just like I did, for example, in Sword and Caravan, in the travel rules where the DM can just roll and just go with what rolls, and with very little input on his part, that just works, right? Or in Cults of Chaos, where you can create an enemy group in like 5 minutes and have a whole adventure set up. Here, what I did was that when you get to a planet or get to a star system, you as the DM, you could do it beforehand, right? But if you needed to, you could generate it in that moment, figure it out very quickly. You would know what it was like before the Confederation, and then you'd modify to see what it now has become, like how much it has degraded, what things have changed. And then you can go to such and such planet, in the system, and look around in the areas that there are these different places that you might discover there, these complexes or things that are maybe abandoned, or maybe they're still under the control of people who claim to be, the descendants of the original creators, or that are maybe now ruins, right? That you can go looking for treasure, and essentially those are like high-tech dungeons. We've got a couple of super chats here. $20 from Space Zeus. Thank you so much for that. He says, but are there Daleks? Joke for the Domino Fund. Well, there isn't Daleks, but actually in a one sense there is, because
more like Terminators,
Yeah, the premise of the present day of the setting is that it's 200 years after the 13th Machine War, which is when a artificial intelligence race developed in some part of the galaxy, and apparently this is the 13th one of these times that it's happened over the last couple of billion years. So it's a consistent problem, and like AIs are seen as very dangerous to all organic life, because sooner or later they try wanting to destroy everything. So one of these showed up in a little corner of the world that of the galaxy that was paying attention to, and by the time they were discovered, there was way too many of them to stop, and they started ravaging through the galaxy, killing every organic thing they could find, right? And those were the cause of the collapse of the Human Confederation, right? They wiped out the Human Confederation's homo, because the Human Confederation was the closest to them. They were like right next door. They didn't realize it because it was an area of space they hadn't explored. But it was. It's
very much like mechanoids, I think.
Yeah, mechanoids is that would be an excellent example. All glory to Palladium Books for that one. And so like those guys are like kind of the Daleks. But the thing is that by the time where you're actually playing, they were not defeated, but they were stopped by two of the originator races of the galaxy that are now like these super powerful, like they're Kirby-esque super villains, or super beings, right? where they can just wave a hand and create a gigantic force field that trapped all the remaining AI in one area, right, or something like that. So those guys are not really the main villains. The villains are all the other kind of the raiders, the pirates among the humans, right, the renegades, the members of the religious order that lost their faith and have now become tyrants. And then the aliens that the humans had fought against for long periods of time, or who had opposed, or maybe some who had previously been allies, that are now like eating up human territory because they don't have a coherent government, right? So that's kind of the, if you want to have like a villain of the story, that's what you've got there, is that it is the collapse of the Confederation and just all of these various threats and the need to rebuild somehow. Another super chat, this one from Agile Monk 6305. For a few years now, I've wanted to ask this question. What makes you two like to work together so much to produce TTRPG content? Do you want to go first on this one, Matt Scribe?
Well,
what is so wonderful about
it's probably the esoteric demonic pact that we have. No, no, I don't know. It's interesting. It was a weird series of events, and I don't know really how. I don't know if I've ever really talked about this, so I don't know how to express it. But essentially, there was a time when I was a extreme leftist, and I was very happy being a stupid leftist, and then I voted for Trump, and all hell broke loose, and I lost a bunch of friends, all my gaming friends, my entire gaming group that I'd been with for 25 years or something, and I felt like an outcast, and I didn't play much. The game store that I used to go to was quite liberal and all that. And so, and then COVID happened and all that too, right? And so I ended up just kind of becoming a recluse, for a while. And I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and Pundit's videos were one of the, few channels that I kind of noticed and started watching. And I said, I kind of like this guy. And I just was a fan of the show. And I don't remember how we first ended up interacting on the internet, but, it was kind of, I think I'd started promoting my own game that I had produced a game much earlier, but was still, kind of periodically promoting that online. And, I know what it was. I sent you a review copy.
Yeah,
and I didn't think you would actually.
If I'm not mistaken, the first real interaction was you had wanted to send me a review copy of Encore, which incredibly arrived. Yes,
but
I don't remember.
I really didn't
shell for that or how you got it here. But you got it.
I really didn't think you were going to even bother because I was a virtual nobody, and you did it.
Look, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Sure.
If anybody has an RPG that they are published and commercially for sale, right? Like if you got on Drive-Thru or on Amazon or whatever, right? I don't review some a bunch of notes someone has just written on paper or something like that, or free RPGs, because otherwise it would be too much of a burden at this point for how many people want me to review their books, right? But if you've published a book, whether or not it's famous, right? If you want to send it to me. If it's an RPG book, obviously, I'm not talking about other subjects, though some other subjects might be interesting, who knows, then I will review it, right? I can't guarantee that I'll give it a good review. I can't say whether I'll be nice or not, but I will review it. And that is publicity. And publicity is the most important thing in this business. So
for me, it was great because, again, you're somebody that I enjoyed watching, and I thought it was a pretty great deal to had my game on your show. So that was great. I remember you not liking a whole lot of things, but that's all right. But you did the review, and then you contacted me afterwards, and you were like, "Hey, listen, I'm really impressed with the art and the layout and everything like that." You were looking for somebody to publish one of your books, and you asked if I would do it, and I had never done that before except for my own book. And to be honest, I was self-taught. I had to teach myself how to use Adobe InDesign with no college, and so I kind of stumbled through it, and I thought, well, man, I don't know if I'm good enough to make a book for Pundit, but I really had to step up my game, and I watched a lot of tutorials, and I practiced a lot, and I made oh God, what was that first game we did? Was it Sword and Caravan, or was it
Sword and Caravan, I believe? Yeah.
I really liked that setting. I've always been fascinated with the Silk Road and that kind of thing, and so just one thing led to another, and you were like, "Hey, you want to do the next one?" and the next one, and I was like, "Okay, sure." And we've just we've done pretty well. Yeah, we've done pretty well together.
I have an ongoing campaign of Sword and Caravan. It's been going on for years now, and it's just fantastic, right? Like there's so much you can do in this setting. It covers the entire Silk Road in the 1190s to the 1220s. So it's like from the Third Crusade, that's Richard the Lionheart, all the way to Genghis Khan, and when he wipes out everyone. And it's got details on every single major city in the Silk Road in that period. The customs, the rules, there's classes, there's everything in there, and it is a complete open sandbox sort of system. There are rules about traveling along the road, about encounters you can have, about what cities are like. All of these. That's another great sandbox game for sure. Yeah. I mean, all your games are kind of like that anyway. Yes,
which is I'm an old school player too, so I for many years we like I said, we even before the gaming group that I had that broke up and after Trump, way back in the early 80s, 82 through probably 89, I had a gaming group that consisted of about 12 people, and every game we did was a sandbox essentially, and we did a lot of old school first edition AD&D, and it just brings back a lot of memories for me. I kind of like that style. But I really enjoyed making those books with you, and I've gotten better each time I've done something. Sometimes I cringe at some of the layout or pictures that I see from some of the other earlier books, and then you look at I think the best one we did was Baptism of Fire.
Yeah.
What was that?
It's been a constant process of improvement, right? Like, I mean, you look at my earliest books, like I bought a few. Heralds of Indra that was done by Bedrock Press, which is a very fine.
And I'm impressed with some of the artistic elements in that one too. Particularly because I used to live in India, so I picked up that game. But I think Baptism of Fire was probably our best. I think that. Well, I don't know. I mean, because the Viking one, I really like that one too. So I don't know.
Are you saying was it our best
in
the sense of our bestseller, or in the sense of
no, just as like my personal favorite, the way it looks, and I was very happy with the layout, and I was very happy with the artwork, and because that stuff doesn't always turn out the way you want, and sometimes you have to make compromises, and then like I said, sometimes it's the best I can do at that time, and then I learn something different. So we'll see. I think with Sons of Heaven, again, I've noticed a shift where I've kind of had to step up, because I'm like, well, I got to make it better than the last one, Yeah. And how do I do that? And so I've been watching a lot of videos on design, and a lot of looking at a lot of other people's games, right? How are they doing the layout? What kind of page elements do they have in there that I've not done before? And so I'm trying to mess around with some new stuff.
So like one of the reasons to now give my answer here, I was real, like I said, just as Chris said, I was really impressed with Anchor. I mean, not so much as a system, because I'm an OSR guy, right? But
D12, damn it.
The art and the layout was incredibly good for someone I had basically not heard of up to that time, right? And I thought, oh, well, you know, when I was looking, because after the Invisible College, I was looking for a new publisher, because the Invisible College was published by a guy who likes occult stuff, right? And so that was the only thing that he was going to do for me. That's fine, right? So I was looking for a different publisher. I could have gone back to some of my old publishers like Spectre Press or maybe Presses or whatever, but I was so impressed that when I started working on Sword and Caravan, I had decided to, and I never usually do this. I went to a publisher, that is to say, Chris, and suggested that he should pitch for doing this book, because I could see that he was going to be, it was going to, whatever he made was going to be a really beautiful book, right? And has been, and each one of his books has been tremendously impressive. All the ones he's published with me. And I'm specifically interested, or I was specifically interested in Sons of Heaven being done by Chris, because Anchor is a game that is sci-fi, but it is this kind of retro futurist sci-fi, because it's like ancient Mesopotamians in space, right? And that is exactly the kind of style that I wanted for Sons of Heaven. I didn't have a clear vision of all of how the artistic look of it was going to be, but I figured that Chris would probably be able to figure that out, or to help me figure it out collectively, the two of us, in a way that would be much better than any other publisher I could imagine, because he'd kind of done it before, right? So,
well, and you know, the weird thing about it is, you would think that it because I had already done a game similar in style to that, that it would come easy. But the part that, you know, the thing that gets me is like, I try to make it different, because I don't want it to look like my game.
I made it hard for you, because I was very explicit to say, this can't look like Star Trek and it can't look like Star Wars. It can have a little bit of each of those, maybe, but it's got.
And I think you threw in, it can't look like Buck Rogers, or and it can't. It was like, it can't Battlestar Galactica, and I was like, well, it doesn't leave anything, you know.
Well, then we started talking about like the 70s and 80s Euro sci-fi comics, right? And I thought that was kind of a good element to put in there. And then of course there was that retro futurism of you know, Sons of Heaven. You could call it Bible stories in space, right?
but then the first draft of, like, I sent you a bunch of images, you know, I was like, what do you think of this? You know, is this style okay, or what do you think? You know, and it was a little too 70s. It looked very much, you know, like a 70s sci-fi novel cover or poster from, you know, Frazetta or something, but it was a little too dated. And I know you didn't want that. You were like, well, if anything, it's more 80s or 90s, or, you know. So I was like, okay, well, so I had to scrap everything I was working on and kind of redo it. And it for the longest time, it had me stumped, you know, because again, I have my own ambition. I still have my own ambitions of coming out with some more books for Encore, and, you know, sometime down the pipe here. But I didn't want to use the stuff that I had kind of planned for my stuff for your book. And so,
but eventually, the incredible thing is, like, you're right that there was a long period where it just wasn't working.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it started to work.
Then it just kind of snapped. And I don't know really what that was. I think what it was is I I started thinking, I was reading through the material and I was trying to think of like, well, let me get my head into the game in the sense of, well, what kind of character would I like to play? Or if I was going to run a game, what would I do with this? And the first thing that kind of struck me was like something akin to Firefly or Defiance. I don't know if you've ever seen either of those shows, but
I saw Firefly. Yeah.
But Defiance, I think, is a really good example. It even has some of the same alien races in there, although they're fairly generic, in that sense. But I started looking.
I never watched it. So.
Yeah, well, I started looking at that, at that show, and then thinking, okay, well, what's the aesthetic for this? What's the look? It's a little post-apocalyptic. It's a grittier sci-fi, and there is, depending on where you go, I mean, it can be quite futuristic and high tech, and there's other places where it's essentially Mad Max, So, but I was really thinking about those two shows in particular, and I thought, all right, well, there's a definite style that kind of goes along with those shows. And so I started looking for art that was kind of along in that vein, and I think it works. I'm very happy with most of the art that I have right now. I'm still trying to take some of the early artwork and redo it. Uh-huh. We are using AI for most of the artwork again, but those platforms have changed in the last 6 months.
Incredible! It's incredible how quickly they're improving.
So, I was using Midjourney 6, and now they're on Midjourney 8.1, and so the difference is just stellar. And then, I use ChatGPT some for some of the stuff. Actually, it's interesting because ChatGPT is way better than Midjourney. Usually, if I give both of them the same prompt
for art, you mean
for art?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to misconstrue. We every word in this book is something Pundit wrote, and we don't, other than using spell check. There's no other AI that's involved in that.
The text is zero AI in this book. Yeah. I'll tell you that much.
And that's the same with all. I mean, we've never done that with any of the books, but the artwork.
I know that I could probably learn about using AI for certain things in terms of writing. But I just
no, you don't want
I
to.
Just don't, because no. I can't help myself.
Yeah, it's not worth. When you start getting people, the accusations on that end would just be, you'd be no better than a WotC at that point, I guess, where they just pump out complete AI books.
That sort of thing is terrible, right? But I know I've heard people saying that, it's good for editing, it's good for spell checking and stuff like that. But I use Open Office, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, I use it to spell check, but I have to read the entire book over and over and over. I'm looking for, is sentence structure okay? Is this a little too wordy? That's I've said this before, but it's not a real jab. It's just Pundit can be quite wordy when he writes something. So
I write like an academic.
He'll have a paragraph this big.
Every book I've written, whether it's stuff like Baptism of Fire, historical RPGs, or it's just pure fantasy.
It's like High Gygaxian.
I'm a historian, so all of them are history books in some sense.
But sometimes you'll find a run-on sentence that's half the page. But other than that, there's really no problems. I have to sometimes put in punctuation and break up the sentences a bit to make it flow better. But yeah, so I'm still I'm using excuse me, I'm using AI to do the bulk of the images. And literally, because I've been working on this about 6 months, literally within 6 months, the artwork has gotten so much better that now it makes the early artwork look like shit. So, I'm like, well, I can't put these two together on the same page or something. They're going to look terrible. So I'm having to redo some of it, you know. But the
well, but it is the art. All the art that you've been sending me lately, anyways, has been really amazing. And I think, like, if I remember correctly, this is at least my recollection of the process, right? Is that the place where we started kind of syncing up was when you point out all the different alien races, and we started looking at how they should look like, right? And then after that, it was like spaceships, and then after that, I think everything kind of flowed out of those two
right.
parts.
And to be honest, I'm still a little stumped on some of the spaceships, but we'll get it done. Yeah. But the problem is I don't want all the spaceships to look the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I tried to make the point that each of the different cultures have spaceships that look a bit different from each other. You know,
it's extremely hard, though. You know, one thing that AI does not do well is variety within the same theme. So, you know, you can ask it to make a particular style of spaceship, or, you know, give it the prompts that I use are like a paragraph long. You know, do you want to really do it right? And so the first one it'll make is amazing, and then you'll say, okay, well, this same culture has a transport vessel as well, and a smaller starfighter, and I want to use those same kind of design elements.
Yeah, it has to look similar
into these other ships, right? And then it has no idea what it just makes something completely off the wall, and it's completely different than what you want. Or you may get those three ships, and then, okay, well, now I've got this other alien race that's completely different, and I prompt it completely differently than the other ship, and now all three of those ships look exactly the same as the other culture, and I'm just like, what are you doing, you know? But to be honest, I mean, even if I was using a physical artist, I've had this problem in the past where I'll tell them, you know, I'll give them prompts like, do this and this and this and this, and I want the ship to be this color and to look, you know, this shape, and it has to have this element, and you get something back that's completely not what you asked for. I mean, but now you've paid $500 for that one.
Yeah, that's the difference.
So either way, it can be rough, and I'm just, you know, the art direction sometimes is a little harder than you would think. You'd think, oh, well, you just tell it to do something, or, you know, but it's not that simple. You really have, you know, prompting.
When you were doing when you were sending me some early samples, I remember that there was a long period of time where each one I said, well, you know, this isn't quite correct, or this isn't like this, or and like for the last several months now, everything you've sent me, I've said, oh yeah, that's perfect. You know, so obviously we're on the right track. Yeah.
Either that, or I just thought you were getting tired of me.
But, no. I believe me. If I saw something, I said, no, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
I would tell you. You know?
Yeah. So it's you know. Then again, the prompting. I have to watch. You know, you can watch a lot of tutorial videos on how to do this correctly, and you can talk to ChatGPT, and it'll give you, you know, clues on how to prompt things. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll chat with ChatGPT for half an hour and discuss how to prompt effectively for this mid-journey picture that I'm trying to make. And then it'll give me a prompt, and then I'll send it to Mid-Journey. And sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't. And then sometimes I can throw that same prompt into ChatGPT, and it makes a much better picture. ChatGPT is interesting because ChatGPT likes you to chat with it, right? And with Midjourney, you type in, I want A, B, and C to equal this, to equal D, and then it's very binary, and you just type it in and you send it. But with ChatGPT, you have to discuss like, well, I'm making this book and this is the type of setting, and I'm really wanting this particular character class to evoke this kind of a theme, and how do I get there? And then GPT will say, I think I have an idea. We could do this, this, and this, and this. And you say, okay, well, let's elaborate on that. And then you go back and forth for an hour, and then you get a prompt, and then you tell it to go ahead and do that. And then now you've got this really stellar looking picture. But you can only make 3 pictures a day. So unless you pay, well, for a business version of it would be like $100 a month. And so I'm not going to do that right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been thinking about it though, because GPT will actually make, like, the difference in quality is so much better. Sometimes with like Midjourney yesterday, I had to prompt, I put in 100, it was like 100 and something, 103 or 4 different prompts. And, it takes me 15 minutes or something to make a prompt. So, I mean, literally all day. I mean, like, I spent like 12 hours yesterday trying to get one image. And I finally got it, and it didn't look all that great. And, when I finished it, and then I took it and put it in Photoshop, and I had to fix everything that was wrong with it. And, I don't have one of those, I don't know what they call it, but the, like the screens where you can actually use like a stylus to draw on it. I've just got a desktop computer and a mouse. And so I'm taking a mouse and trying to draw shit in there. And
oh, geez.
it's yeah. I mean, now I was an art major in college. I switched to history later, but early on I was an art major, but that was before computers existed. So, it's a whole different, it's a learning curve with that. But, you put it in Photoshop for a while and mess around with it, and you take it out, and I looked at it, and then the 24 hours had, went by, had expired. So I was able to then get ChatGPT to make some more pictures. And I put the same prompt into ChatGPT, and I put the two together, and I was like, this one is like 50 times better than that first one,
Crazy.
And it's just, so you can spend 12 hours on something, and then the other one does it in 3 minutes. It's just.
Huh. So we got a question here. Well, I think actually there's a question for me and a question for you, but yours, I think you've just been talking about it, because he said, for Chris, how does your approach to the art change? And I think we were just talking about that. And for me, he says, whereas fantasy tends to be dungeon-centric, how's your approach to sci-fi different? Well, like I said, in Sons of Heaven, you could run a game that is like very kind of old school, where your characters are going to these ruined planets and trying to loot the remains of super high tech from the old Confederation and stuff like that, stuff that's valuable that you can then travel around and trade or use for yourself or whatever. And there are these complexes, some of which might be now populated with dangerous things that are essentially kind of like dungeons. But beyond that, there's also, there's the opportunity to go and engage in trade. There are rules about how to trade in the game. You could be part of the movement to try to restore civilization. That there is one part of the former Confederation that is now starting to coalesce together into a new polity that has a chance to fight back against the different perils that are threatening the Confederation. There's also a very strong kind of religious element in Sons of Heaven, which is that the humans have a religion that is essentially a cargo cult based on a very tiny number of texts from old Earth that is now lost, right? No one knows even where it is in the context of the of the human race. And those texts are now looked at as foundational civilizational texts. Mm-hmm. And from that, they developed or reinvented a monotheistic religious concept that was combined with the fact that in the game, travel through hyperspace requires navigators that have psychic abilities, right? And so the humans, when they entered into contact with alien beings, was when they were conquered by one of these alien races and basically taken as slaves, because this race has no psychics, right? And so they had to conquer other races that had psychic potential, and then enhance that psychic potential on certain humans that had the right genetic traits, and they became hyperspace navigators. But in the process of traveling through hyperspace, you end up having these kind of mystical experiences, and they translated that into a religion where they venerate the Lord of Heaven. After the humans liberated themselves and founded the Confederation, the people who had those traits that were now inheritable to certain degrees ended up becoming kind of the religious order, So you could also be working with those groups called the sages that are trying also to maintain the light of civilization. And it's an interesting sci-fi setting because that religious faith is one of the core things that keeps human culture together, right? And so you could be looking at it from that point of view. Also, you could be working for the sages, or you could just be pirates, if you really want to be. So like there's all kinds of things you can do in the setting, right?
Yeah, it's a very playable game. I mean, it's there's so much potential there.
Many different campaigns, right? Campaigns that are not going to be similar to each other. Let me see here if we've got. I thought we had some other questions. Samukira says, "I love the high Punditian writing." That's great.
Yes.
And okay, I think we're caught up now. So what else can we say about it? I've seen your proposed cover for the book. It's not quite ready yet, I guess, but I will probably put it out at some point when it is ready and you've decided that's the final cover.
Yeah,
I think it looks great.
The one I sent you last night I think that'll probably be the image.
The final one.
The placement of the text and the font may change depending on what your final kind of verdict on that is. I didn't know if you wanted, the one I showed you had it right in the center. With it being Sons of Heaven, if we put it in one long line, we'd have to make it smaller and put it a little closer to the top.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's better the way.
However you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that the title in that last image you sent me is pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I kind of like that metallic texture I was able to put on there, and so I thought it kind of popped a little better. But yeah, that's probably the eighth or ninth iteration of that cover. So, but it's basically the concept you gave me early on, that you wanted almost a David and Goliath kind of effect.
Yeah, well, it's actually a seminal part of the timeline, right? It's probably a really good.
Well, when we were discussing like what images to possibly use for a cover, and you were like, oh, it could be a space battle, or maybe we could have a couple of the different playable character types or something standing next to each other, and And then I thought, when you mentioned, the story of, is it Salion? Gillian of Salion. I think that's his name.
No, that's the guy that is trying to restart he's trying to create a human empire basically, but no, the
is it not the same kid?
It's Dalian actually. It's this kid that comes out of nowhere and ends up becoming the real hero of the story, So which is totally, yes, it's absolutely a riff on the story of David, right?
But when you told me that, I was
Bible stories in space,
Yeah, when you told me that, I was immediately I was like, oh yeah, that's got to be the picture, that's the one.
And it works, I think.
Yeah.
It works really good.
It took a long time to get it to work out in AI, though, I'll tell you that. But and again, like I said, usually you'll get a decent picture, but then okay, there's half a dozen things wrong with it, and getting those programs to fix any of those things is the problem, and they never do it right. And then the more you mess with it, the more the general picture altogether changes slightly and starts to be messed with. And by the time you're at the end of it and you think you fixed all the little problems, now the entire picture has degraded some, so you're, I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad we got the image that we did, though. I think it's going to work out really well.
I think so, right? I kind of like that it's almost a little bit, if you don't know what's already in the book, it looks a little bit deceptive, right? Because it looks almost like, this is like the bad guy is going to win, right? It's the moment before things turn around, right? So it's pretty interesting. So Timothy Shanks asked me, are you going to adapt World of the Last Sun to Sons of Heaven? Well, no, because World of the Last Sun is not really a sci-fi setting. It could happen in Warpland. I'm telling you, the warp zone. Part of the World of the Last Sun, maybe, but
it's in the warp zone.
World of the Last Sun is a weird fantasy campaign. It's a science fantasy at best, right? So it is. I don't think it would fit with these rules, right? These rules, like the mechanics that I'm using are basically the mechanics of Star Adventure, and those are mechanics for like serious sci-fi.
Yeah, I mean, this is a serious game. And not to speak ill of Avenger Satanis, because I love him and I love Chalt, but like the few times that I've played Chalt, it seemed like a very World of the Last Sun kind of a game. It's very gonzo, kind of out there, weird, like a retro 80s style of weird sci-fi and horror.
It's sci-fi horror comedy, right? With Ben Hill thrown in, so it's like, it is also not really sci-fi, because he doesn't have mechanics for starships or things like that, right? It's all just about the space is the comedic backdrop for what he's doing, right? Which is sometimes brilliant, right? Like the real setting is like this weird, the Black Pyramid and all that.
Everything.
Sort of
so it's like Tim Burton inspired. I don't know. It's like,
it is a little bit, yeah, for sure. So Samu Kira says this will be the first. Star Adventure will be the first product of yours that I buy. I tried Stars with a number. I felt lacked identity. I was thrilled when you said you'd have a setting now. Well, Star Adventure are basically a set of core rules. That it doesn't have a setting in it. Star Adventure is only about 34 pages long, but it's a complete set of rules for playing space opera, right? Now, if you wait a little while, you could also get Sons of Heaven, which has it has the same rules basically as Star Adventure, though it is though those rules have been altered to specifically fit this setting, and the setting is quite important in Sons of Heaven, right? It's an actual full-blown setting,
Yeah, and like we were discussing earlier, it's not going to be long. It's I think we could be done with my portion of like editing the book and everything in about a week. Then Pundit will get it for a week or so, and then we'll send it to the publisher, the printer, drive through and Ingram and that sort of thing. Now they'll usually sit on it for a couple of weeks and then approve it. I'm hoping that goes as smoothly as possible, and so within a month or so, I think we could have this out.
I hope so. There's absolutely nothing controversial in the book.
So well,
that'll be a problem.
That hardly matters anymore. It's all political. It's just, but like I said, they have. I can't prove anything, but they taken a long time to approve our books. When I know other people who are leftists that
I suppose
books, they get theirs.
They want to look it over really closely to see.
If we were both Democrats, our book would be out like next week. So whatever. As long as it does go through, I'm happy with it.
Asks, what's the rough page count? And I mean, I only know that in the Word file that I did.
Yeah, I don't know.
46 pages of 12-point type in Times New Roman single spaced.
I don't know because
obviously going to be more than that in the full book with the art and everything.
Right. When I took his manuscript and I had to break it into sections, and then edit those sections, one at a time, and then drop that into Adobe InDesign and do the artwork. Well, because I'm using these kind of decorative templates that I've created, and I'm putting the artwork in the templates as like a texture, and then dropping that where needed in the text. Well, they're not linked to the text, so if I add more text, it can sometimes shift everything in a place where I don't want it. So I'm having to work front to back and do that fairly slowly. And so I haven't laid out all the pages of the book yet, and so I don't know what the final page count's going to be until I'm done. But it's a fairly big book.
It will be, yeah. It'll be more than 150 pages, obviously.
Yeah.
Because just the text was
right. I mean, it's probably, I guess it might be twice that, because when art takes up a lot of space, and then I've got kind of a decorative page border, so that squeezes in the available space to put your rows of text. And you don't want crowding or anything real too close to the edges of that. And so, if you want the book to look nice, it's got to be spread out a bit. So I would venture to say 200 plus, if he gave me 100 pages. So it's probably double whatever he sent me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And that is something we're going to talk about later with regards. I'm going to ask the audience about this sort of thing with my Roman game, because that one's even bigger.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a huge one.
so the
400 pages or something. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I'm debating, as I told you, I'm debating whether it should be in one book or two books. Kind of the rules guide and the setting guide or something like that,
yeah, it's a tough call.
A very big book. Yeah,
I'd like to know what everybody thinks of that idea too.
Yeah, because
it is going to take longer. Well, I don't know. It'd take the same amount of time, I would imagine, but printing costs and shipping costs.
The bigger a book is, the more
it all goes up,
relatively speaking, right? So,
and not to mention, because On Cur was like that too. My first iteration of that book was close to 400 pages, and then I ended up splitting the book into a Dungeon Master's Guide, like a Game Master's Guide and a Player's book, And I did that because it was so thick that print on demand spine quality on those books is not very good. In particular, not the soft cover, you would think, but the soft cover actually was pretty sturdy because it's glued in like that. But
it's the hardcovers that always.
It's the hardcover that I was at a convention and I opened one to sign it, and the damn spine on it cracked, and the book come apart. And that's embarrassing. And it's like, well, now somebody, nobody's going to want to buy this book that's like, tears on them. So you got to kind of watch how thick it is. If you're not going to, I wouldn't print it through drive-through if you're going to do that. Like if you have ambitions of making like a 400-page book, definitely go to somebody like Lulu or something like that. You're going to have to pay a premium price to get those printed. So you're going to make less on it. And then those books are, trust me, a book like that is heavy. And when let's say I want to get some books shipped to me so I can take them to a convention or whatever, it's like $500 or $600 to get a box of books, just one, so that I can take with me because it weighs like 50 pounds. And so it's kind of crazy, so it's sometimes better just to get, do two smaller, lighter books that's
kind of my thinking as well. And it'd be better to have two,
but
books.
Customers don't always like that. I've had that deal because you split the book and then the customers come up and they're like, oh, well, you're just trying to gouge us, or, I really would prefer it all been in one book. And you're like, so you can't really,
question. Yeah, it is. But
it's like,
I guess it depends on how much the price difference becomes, right? And and of course, if you do it with two books, if both books come out roughly at the same time, in drive-through you could bundle them as a package or something,
Yeah.
So if people want to buy them both at once, you get
you could do that.
Slightly better price, or something like that. But it's the problem is there was nothing I could think of that I could keep out of this book, right? Like, the other way would have been to have taken out a whole bunch of the optional, the less, not the optional, but the less essential rules and less essential setting elements, and then release those as a book later, right? But it feels to me like someone who would want this would want to have the most possible useful information for running the game at the same time, So it's a bit tricky, but we're gonna have to keep thinking about that.
So tell Pundit in the comments, would you rather have one book
tell us
or
what
two?
You think, right? Would you rather have a really expensive one single giant book, or would you rather have two more moderately priced smaller books, one of which would be kind of focused on the core gameplay and the other one that would have the additional material that would be really useful as resources in running the game?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the way to split it, basically. Because this is going to be a tremendous book, right? But I guess before we carry on into the Roman game, I could talk a bit about what you're going to get in Sons of Heaven. So as I said, Sons of Heaven has basically the same rules as Star Adventurer, but they have been altered to fit the particular setting. So if you're one of the people that bought Star Adventurer, you're going to be very familiar with the base.
And it's a lot more extensive. You're talking, like you said, 35 pages versus this is going to be over 200. So in 100 of that at least is all text.
Yeah.
So
tons of it is going to be different. Now, some of it has been published in the Pundit Files series. In the original version, I've changed some of the rules that I had put in some of those Pundit Files issues, but not too much. So there's some material that you can already get a sneak peek of what is going to be in Sons of Heaven. Looks like so far we've got 2 votes for splitting the books. So there we are. So the system is obviously OSR if you're not familiar with it. The races are going to be specific to the races that are found in the game, but then there's an appendix that lets you have mechanics to create new alien races, because of course there are lots of alien races that are not like major races that could be found in some of these planets. The classes have been slightly altered to fit the setting, but they're very similar to the ones in Star Adventurer. The skill system works the same. The sages are basically the psychics from Star Adventurer. You've got there's obviously some new technology involved there, but some of them are similar again to Star Adventurer. There's just more stuff than before. And then you get all the basic rules, right, of all the things you need to do for combat, skill checks, et cetera. There's much more information in Sons of Heaven about like starships and starship piloting and navigation and travel times and all that sort of thing. The style is a kind of space opera, right? But it's a serious kind of space opera. So like it is theoretically possible you could get into a space fight and your ship could get blown up and have a total party kill that way, right? So it's not a space opera that is easygoing in terms of mortality, right? It's got very much the OSR perspective on mortality. And then there's vast sections describing all the different areas of the galaxy. The areas that are ruled by alien races have relatively smaller information, and then there's a whole bunch of both rules and mechanics relating to the planets, to the area that was human space and that is now kind of a chaotic area that the characters are likely to be based in, at least in the beginning of the campaign. There's rules on generating star systems and planets and cultures. There's a variety of rules on, like I said, on trade, on different kinds of jobs that you can take up, rules on negotiation and buying and selling stuff. There's rules for creating random high-tech ruins, that your characters can explore, basically dungeons in essence. There is, what else have we got here? Well, there's rules on valuable items, high technology from the tail end of the Confederation that is no longer available post-Confederation, so super science and things like that. There's details on different locations you can find in planet, like places where there might be adventure queues and things like that. A lot of that is, these appendices are all meant for the DM to be able to very easily generate activity encounters, adventure queues, etc. for play. There's rules for creating robots. There's rules for creating random alien races and alien animals. You have a set of random encounter tables. Then you get into like guides to the culture of the Confederation, right? Details about the history of the galaxy, details about the holy texts that the humans venerate. And then you have a campaign timeline that is obviously optional, but that it details a lengthy period of time at the way that things could develop from the start of the campaign forward, which is essentially the process by which humanity manages to come back together again. You have some name tables, and obviously there's a lot of details in all of this about opponents and creatures and all of those sorts of things that you would need as a DM to manage. But I tried, in as much as possible, apart from like the appendix and some of the explanatory stuff of the setting, to have a lot of this done in the form of random generators so that the DM can roll those, or he can pick and choose in such a way that he can make it, the way he wants to make it,
I really thought that was cool too, because it leaves a lot of the galaxy open for interpretation too. Like you've got random generators for alien races that go above and beyond what are the playable races, and so it kind of seems to me like a little bit of like the old Star Wars RPG in that respect, because you've got so many, there's like 1,000 worlds or something that are populated with beings, and so the book details like a dozen of them, but there are these other creatures that are just whatever your game master creates for that scenario, or so you're able to make determine new races and determine what they look like, what their abilities are, what kind of world they live on. Maybe their sun is blue and it has this effect on them, and so it's kind of cool stuff. So like I said, I really appreciate the fact that it really is a sandbox game, and you can kind of tailor it to whatever you want to do. Whether you want to run something similar to, say, Serenity or Firefly, or maybe you'd like to have something more akin to Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or something like that. You certainly could. Maybe you're the humans
of all of those in the game.
You could be the humans that are living on the fringes of old Earth space, where you're very close to the machine empire, and so they're you essentially are being attacked by the Cylons constantly. So it's got a lot of potential, and I think you could 10 people could run this and have 10 different games, totally different games, and it's and it would still work.
You can make it fit for whatever way you want to run it. So Sam Ukira says, regarding Sons of Heaven, how much of the historically authentic aesthetic DNA did you incorporate it, at least in terms of life? Well, I like I said, I've said that this is like the Bronze Age collapse in space, and then like Bible stories in space, right? So it's definitely got. I've written it as though it was a history book, right? In a way, right? Like that it's got a timeline, it's got a concept to it. And so it has, and I've worried a lot about how to generate human culture, right? Because part of the concept in the story is that like sometime not too long in our future, these aliens come, they enslave all of humanity and take them away to be slaves, and they're slaves for like, a very long time until they liberate themselves. And then they have to develop their own culture, right? And so there's a lot of notes about what that culture is like, And so you've got, for example, the sages. In some ways, they definitely have some of the DNA of Jedis, if you would, but or of maybe some of those like religious groups in Dune or stuff like that, But they're also different. They're also kind of inspired in part by like both kind of the priestly classes of the ancient world, or like Confucian scholars and things like that. Like it's so they're not going to be exactly the same, right? But they're going to have some of that element, and it's those sorts of things where you can put in a lot of like culture elements into it. And like I said, when you generate a random planet in the Confederation, right, in the ruins of the Confederation, there are part of what you generate is like, what is their society like now, right? Because like 200 years ago, when the machine war happened, they all had kind of a common culture, but even there, each planet had its own specific cultural differences because it takes time to travel, and each planet would gradually develop their, each colony would develop their own culture. But now, after 200 years, some of these people have been completely isolated for a very long time, and so they've gone in weird directions, and so that's part of what you generate too, and depending on what your character, like if your character is just hopping from planet to planet, it's going to be mostly vignettes, right? But if they end up like getting involved with a certain planet, then that becomes really important,
Right.
So,
and you could stay local to one system and play a campaign that lasts for 10 years and never leave that system if you wanted.
If it was an interesting enough system, especially.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, everything in history that's ever happened on Earth has never left the system. So,
That's right. So Monkey is, I think, responding to the question about the Roman game. He says, one for now and later source books like he did for Baptist Fire. Well, the problem with that, I mean, I will probably end up making other books for this game because it has a lot of potential. There's a lot of stuff that's untouched. I mean, definitely, I could add a ton more Roman magic to the game because, archaeologically, we have like hundreds of texts on Roman magic. Well, not Roman, but Greco-Egyptian magic that the Romans used, right? So that would be something that could be a future source book to expand the magic system and everything. But the core book, the way I've written it right now, I think that you need to have both parts so that you're going to be able to like really effectively play it, right? I mean, unless you're already like if you're a historian that's specialized in the Roman Empire, you might not need the setting part as much, right? But if you aren't, and you want to do something that's authentic, you're going to need it. And because like as much as I guess every guy in the Western world thinks of Rome at least once a day, a lot of them have a particular vision of Rome in their heads that might not be exactly how Rome really was, So I put a lot of stuff in there that is like that might be revealing to a lot of people who haven't got some kind of like in-depth academic professional study of Rome, right? Like, I mean, I'll give you one example, right? Is that when you think of like Roman death sports, you think of gladiators, right? And you think of that as like the ultimate deal. And when you think of gladiators, you think of, I don't know, like Russell Crowe, right? And you think about these guys that are like all super muscled and these incredibly tough looking guys, right? Well, I'm going to shatter some people's brains here, but actual gladiators in the Roman Empire did not look that way. They looked much closer to something like a sumo wrestler, okay? Because gladiators, gladiators were mostly slaves, as you probably know, and they were trained for fighting, but there was a benefit in ideally not having a gladiator, die from some paltry injury, right? And the Romans were smart enough. They were so unbelievably brilliant. There's stuff I discovered while designing this game. Like, I had no idea that the Romans actually had penicillin, right? They had discovered penicillin, and then it was lost until
they would take moldy flatbread and mix honey on it and slap that on a wound. And
because I'm not a historian of medicine, I didn't know that until I looked, right? Because once I started looking at the I always put a herbarium, you might have noticed, in all of my historical campaigns in some place or another, so that people can actually like use, these were the medicines that really existed back then, right? And so that was incredible, right? But so the gladiators, they were intentionally given a diet that was similar to that of a sumo wrestler. So they would have significant layers of fat so that a simple sword cut would be less likely to hit something vital. It would hit the fat,
right,
or a trident point or whatever, right? It would help them to get non-lethal injuries. the guys that were like, and besides that, the guys that were like the real daredevils in Rome were actually the charioteers. Right? We don't think as much about that these days, but the Circus Maximus was insane, right? And all of the, the whole tradition of Roman charioteering, and and that's why, like, there was fan clubs of Roman charioteers, of Roman charioteering teams, because they worked in teams, right? That is crazier than the fandom for the Knicks or whatever, right? Or than World Cup fandom, like there were guys that were like just complete, just like there were soccer hooligans, there was charioteering hooligans, right? Because these guys were absolute daredevils. When you were in the chariot race, it's not like NASCAR today or something like that, because they first of all, the track was set up in such a way that at a couple of vital points, it was almost made so that there was a tremendous risk of having a crash. And besides that, the charioteers could attack the other chariots, right? There was nothing that stopped that from happening, right? And so the lifespan risk of these people was terrible, right? But they also were like the most famous athletes in the empire, right? Like there was one guy who was like the greatest charioteer in Roman history. I'm forgetting his name at this moment, but he had a career of about 24 years as a charioteer. He survived, and the money that he got from the prizes of his winnings was the equivalent of $20 billion in today's money. So like that is the level at which charioteering was like, wow, intense, right? So like that's just one example of many things that are about the Romans, and like that people don't know about, right? And
Pundit, I wanted to show you this book because I believe it's a great read, and I think you would appreciate this. Emperors and Gladiators by Thomas Weideman. I bought this in the late 90s. I'm sure you could still get it somewhere on Amazon. But this is the definitive book on gladiators, and you've got to check this out. I took a trip to Rome shortly after having read this back then, and I talked to some archaeologists there at the Colosseum that confirmed what Thomas Weideman says it here. But apparently everybody has everything wrong about gladiators, because they were technically slaves, yes, but they were all gladiators were volunteers. You could not, and it never happened that somebody would be captured and forced into. Well, they can force you, but they can force you to volunteer is essentially what would happen. So you could have a choice. They would execute you. That would not be
a successful gladiator as a rule.
Right? Well, it would be like you have a choice. You can be executed, or you can volunteer to be a gladiator. Like that might happen if you were, say, a spoil of war.
A tough guy, and you succeeded relatively well in the arena. Yeah. It was a more comfortable life. Now, you had a higher chance of you.
Gladiators were actually part of the priest caste, and they were paid a portion of the house. So, like when they filled the Colosseum, if the winner of that fight, even the loser would get paid, but the winner of that fight would get I think something like 10 to 13% of the house. So you're making millions of dollars. These guys are like NBA players, and they never fought to the death until late in the empire, when that whole thing where those who are about to die salute you was meant as an insult to the emperor, because that emperor for the first time had chosen to make the gladiators fight to the death for his own amusement, because he said it wasn't bloody enough, so he ordered some of them to die. Prior to that, it was to the first blood, and so much like he said, they would kind of fatten themselves up a little bit. That's true. But you would fight, and if you got cut, you lost. But that's why you've got gladiators living 20, 30 years and having a career and losing most of their battles, so
there's
you can't,
a very big difference from the early Republic all the way to the late Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, when they got, you start, I mean, when you start getting folks like Caligula, like I said, who are.
But you're totally right that both the gladiators and the chariot races were religious.
They got paid out, and the reason it was religious, by the way, is early on and this goes back to Etruscan culture too, but going into early Roman Republic, it was a funeral rite, so that when somebody important died, it was customary for there to be someone dressed as life and death, and they would have a mock battle, and you would try to portray that people getting snuffed out by death or vice versa, and in fact every single gladiatorial match at the Colosseum was a funeral service
or a commemoration
so you could not have a gladiatorial match unless it was a funeral. And so what they would do is they'd pick some nobody in politics who died recently, the senator or whatever, he was 75 and he passed away. Yeah. And so now he's the excuse to have 30 days of games, so that's kind of what was going on. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions. People think that it was, very barbaric and that it was all to the death and that they were slaves. And, that kind of thing almost never happened. And the Christians who were fed to the lions and all that, they weren't killed by gladiators. Those were secutors, and secutors were executioners. And so if you were a state executioner, you had the matinee service at the Colosseum. And so the kids would show up. You'd show up with your popcorn and everything and watch the matinee. And the matinee was all the criminals being executed. And they had the bestiarius was another popular one, and that was the one who would fight beasts. And so you would have exotic animals, brought in. Here's a giraffe, and you've never seen a giraffe before. I'm going to cut his head off, and stuff like that. They would fight bears and have wolves and stuff attack, and that's where they fed the people to the lions. It was usually either part of the secutor or the bestiarius shows, but those weren't gladiators in the same sense as the two people who would fight each other. And again, they would be dressed as either somebody would be death, and they would be fighting a person, so it's the struggle of life and death, or they would do something like the fisherman versus the fish, and it's the same kind of these parables and things that they had. So it's interesting.
Very, very interesting. I like I said, I would wager that anyone who ends up getting this Roman book, who has not actually done a kind of a degree in or unless they've been like an amateur historian at an obsessive level, you're going to learn new things about Rome reading this, the kind of the setting part of this book, and some of the rules parts for that matter. Okay. So
and isn't the book based on, I forget the name of them, but the it's kind of like a, almost like a Roman Secret Service.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that because I have a question for the audience here about the title, right? Because I'm having some problem determining what the final title should be. So, you can run this game as whatever you want. You could be legionnaires, you could be just criminals or something. You could be a secret order of some other kind. You could be, you could just be travelers or whatever you wanted, right? But the default fancy of the setting is that it's set up because it's a really good way to create an adventuring party of unorthodox people, is that you are agents of the Frumentari. So for anybody who doesn't know, the Frumentari were originally the grain specialists of the Roman legion. They were an auxiliary legion. They were part of what were called the immunes, which means you're a legionnaire, but you don't actually have to wear the uniform or do drills or do guard duty. You were a specialist, like the engineers were, or other groups like that, right? And the job of the Frumentari originally was that wherever a legion went, they had to make sure that there would be grain supplies that would reach that legion. Right? And
so were they kind of like quartermasters then, or?
Well, in a way, yeah, they were provision specialists, right? That they had to find the best place to get a sufficient source of food that they could then ship to where the legion was, to make sure that the legion was supplied with food, so that there wouldn't be a revolt or something like that, right? And that meant they had to travel all over the empire, right? Because sometimes they had to get it like from Egypt or North Africa, or sometimes they had to go to like some other area that was closer to what was going on, if they were in Pannonia or whatever. And for the first, from the time of the Republic until, or at least the late Republic, I guess, until the time of Trajan, that was their job, right? They had later also taken over some other tasks too in the course of that time, where they also became the supervisors of the mines, right? Gold, silver mines, things like that, right? So they were in charge of making sure that the ores from the mine, met quota and were then delivered to the empire, right? And then they also became couriers, where they would, because they were traveling around everywhere, they would be given vital messages to send to some governor or what have you, right? But then it was Trajan that came up with this idea, because he realized the size of the empire by that time was at its peak, right? And he said, well, I need to know what's really going on, right? Because otherwise there's going to be more of these rebellions like they did in Judea and things like that, right? So he reconfigured the Frumentari so that their cover story is still that they're like, grain specialists, and you might get sent on a mission to do that, right? But they were also secret agents of the emperor, right? Their job allowed them to travel anywhere in the empire. They would be allowed to stay at the misiones, which were like the special imperial houses for imperial agents that were, all kinds of dignitaries or whatever that were traveling along, that they would get to stay there for free. And they would go under the cover of whatever job they're, I'm supervising a mine, or no, I'm sending this message or something, but they were actually there to do some kind of spy job. And then very quickly that turned into assassination jobs. And another thing that they ended up getting by some time, I don't know, if probably around the time of Antoninus or Aurelius, they were in charge of investigating cults that were illegal cults in the empire, like Christians as one example, but there were lots of others, right? And so they are the secret service of the Roman Empire from the 2nd century onwards, right? And so that makes it like a really interesting premise by which you can have a campaign group. They can be sent on missions, right? You can end up taking them as the DM. You can have them, the emperor or the imperial court, send them to anywhere in the empire or beyond, perhaps, right? And of course, different emperors behave in different ways. So some of them might be using the Frumentari for revenge plots, or just for their whims, or to go, I've heard about this monster that's somewhere in Ethiopia, go get it, right? Or something like that, right? So all these sorts of things that you can do with them, right? So the title, I was originally just going to call it Frumentari, but I realized that there's a lot of people that don't know who the Frumentari were, right? And I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't do it like that, right? So then I thought about calling it Agents of Empire, right? Except some people told me that sounds too much like Age of Empire, and that might confuse people.
Yeah.
And so now I'm kind of divided. Like, should I call it Agents of Empire colon Frumentari, or Frumentari colon Agents of Empire, or what it should be titled. So you guys that are in the audience, please let me know which one you think is the best title for the book. I guess you could suggest alternative titles, but I'm going to be pretty. I suspect that I still want it to be something along these lines. And while you guys are thinking about that, there's a question here for me, I guess. What adjustments did you make to Sons? I assume that's meant to be Sons, like Sons of Heaven, to make the rule set match with the setting. So for me, it was relatively simple. Most of the rules were kept the same, but I had to make some changes regarding like the psychic class from Star Adventure versus the sages in Sons of Heaven. In Star Adventure, there's a list of about 20 alien archetypes, and I removed those and instead used the major races of the galaxy in Sons of Heaven as the alien classes that are like the default you can take. But again, the alien generator, you could theoretically use that to have a new species if you wanted to. That could be a player character race too, right? I changed some of the technology. The hyperspace works differently than it did in Star Adventure. But there isn't a big change, right? Most of the mechanics are still kind of the same as they were in Star Adventure. And Chris, he asks, what was the biggest shift in your creative process?
I'm not sure what that means, but I do want to go back to your question though. I thought it was interesting that the government the other day put out some UFO files, and they've got this disclosure document that they put up, and they have said that there are 4 alien races that they know of that have come to Earth and have visited and possibly have relations with the government or whatever. This is all highly dubious anyway, but I thought it was interesting because all 4 of those races are in your game.
That's true. That's true.
So Pundit knows something. So I don't. Let's see.
Say one way or the other.
What is the biggest shift in my creative process? I don't know. I don't know that there has been a shift. I think, I've always, I've always been a gamer, right? So it's not like this kind of stuff is necessarily new to me. So I've got that going for me. And whenever I want to publish a book for Pundit, for example, it's easy enough for me to read the material and understand, where he's coming from on something. And that's what I tend to do is I just, I start by reading all the content, really getting, into that headspace. And then, like I said before, I may try to play around with envisioning, like making a character or making a set of scenarios or something in my head or on paper and just trying to see, how this world kind of plays out. And then once I get into it, I find it very easy at that point to then start visualizing what I want the book to look like, certainly the artwork that goes in the book and that sort of thing. And then it's just kind of a long process of either talking with an artist and, going back and forth and getting that done, or, as of late, and I say, the last few years, I've been getting more and more into using AI just because it's essentially really convenient and I get good results. But, that process, again, like I said before, you have to really figure out a way to convey the expected result in a way that, in a prompt that the computer's going to understand and do. And depending on what system you're using, it rationalizes things differently. So you have to treat prompts for Midjourney different than, say, ChatGPT or something. And those are the only two that I really use, but I have a couple of friends that use other ones. And, you just, it's a slog. I mean, like I said, people think it's easy. It's not. It may take me several days to get one good picture. And that's several days, meaning like 8 hours worth of work per day, like typing in prompts and then trying to change something and then taking that out and throwing it back in and telling it to improve it. And, you just, it's a process. And then just about every image end up, like I said, throwing it into, I use PicMonkey a lot. PicMonkey is like, it used to be the broke version of Photoshop, and it was free. It's since, now they charge people for it, and they've dialed back some of the services. This is like a trend that everybody does, right? Everything's cool and free, and then they start charging you monthly for the less services. But I still like PicMonkey, and I use that a lot to do digital alterations on the images and stuff, and then I'll run it by Pundit. Usually after, when I think it's good, I'll show him, and if he likes it, we'll keep it. If he doesn't, then I'll pull what little hair I have left out and start over. And that's happened a couple of times, which has been kind of funny, because I'll work on something for like 3 or 4 days, and I'm like, oh, this is a perfect picture, and I give it to Pundit, and he's like, oh, this isn't very good. And I'm like, God damn it.
Oh, sorry.
So it's a process, but I don't know if that's what you were exactly talking about as far as a creative process. I guess other creative things that I may do, like creating my own RPG, for example, are not dissimilar. Again, I have to first. It all starts in my head, and I visualize kind of a cool idea that I've got, or a set of kind of pictures in my mind as to what I want a setting to look like, or it might even start with a character concept that develops into a setting, which then develops into an RPG. Hold on a second.
Okay.
I think that's my wife, unless I'm being robbed.
I'm gonna take advantage of the moment to say that
okay.
I suspect that the Roman game is going to be a lot easier for the art part to fit well than Sons of Heaven.
Maybe.
Sons of Heaven is tricky because it's not, if it's like, Poland or the Middle East or whatever, you've got solid things that
I think there's a lot to pull from.
Reality, right? But Sons of Heaven is sci-fi, so it makes it a bit more complicated in that sense.
My wife has just entered with a friendly taste of Mexico.
Oh, there we go. So Crap Bone says, to be fair, as a Christian, I don't care whether it's a gladiator or a secretary who's killing me. Crap Bone, I will mention that Sons of Heaven is set during the Christ, or Sons of Heaven. The Roman game is set in the crisis of the 3rd century, and as you know, that was the great period of the worst persecutions of Christians, and I go into a lot of detail in the setting regarding the martyrs that occurred in that time, the miracles that were involved. There is a class in the game that is the Christian holy man. And the interesting thing about the Frumentari is that towards the end of the time that they existed, they had started out, as I said, part of what their job was to like root out cults that were considered dangerous to the empire, and Christians were among them, right? But for whatever reason, a lot of the Frumentari started to get kind of taken in by the Christians, right? They were part of what
they were well traveled,
they started to sympathize with the Christians. In game terms, that becomes easier because Christians have the power of God, so they can deal with some of the supernatural menaces of the game, right? Like that in ways that are easier than pagans can, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So by the end of the time of the Frumentari, a large section of the Frumentari agents had become Christians. And in fact, Constantine is the one that disbands the Frumentaries and replaces them with an entirely new order called Agentes in Rebus, of which the initial core were those Frumentari agents who were confessed to be Christians, right? So, because of course, Constantine wanted to go that way, right? And so that was that's all kind of part of the timeline of that game.
Well, they would have been exposed, because they're so well traveled and spent time in the Middle East. I'm sure they'd be more exposed to early Christian stuff, through the Greeks and whatever. That's kind of interesting.
So let's see. Ethiopia overflows with money. Yeah, well, for the Monster Compendium, I have made extensive use of Pliny, of course, and then also Aelian, who Aelian was alive at the time of the campaign, right? His writing was in the first third of the 3rd century, right? So Aelian could actually be an NPC who's like an expert on monsters that consults with the player characters, right? Those are like those two guys together did the largest kind of zoological compendium filled with all of these like weird monsters, of course, that were I guess mythological, at least to us. So there you are. So Crafton says, just call it Agents of Empire. Shalbak Bo says, Frumentari Agente Secrete Imperia. I think that's a little too much Latin. Bond, Rome, Bond. I like that. Frumentari Imperial Agents. Eagles in the Dark. I'm not sure about that. Agents of the Imperium.
Yeah, maybe what's the Latin version of Imperial agents? It'd be like Agents Imperium or something like that. You know what I mean? Like Agentis Imperium.
Agentis Imperialis, I think.
Yeah. That would be cool.
Could be. I don't know. I've still got it running around in my head. I got to figure that out. We need to have a title at some point, but well, if there's 2 books, we're gonna need to have 2 titles, I guess. But I guess the difference will be like setting guide, campaign guide, or something like that, or rule guide.
History of the World Part 2.
That's right. Well, Sons of Heaven is a little bit like Jews in Space, so there you go. All right, so I don't know how much more I can tell you guys about the Roman game, but as you can imagine, it's got the magic system is based on how Romans viewed magic, which is generally that Romans were very, very superstitious and cautious about magic, but there were tons of magicians anyways. And the monsters are all based on Roman mythology and Greco-Roman mythology.
Well, again, there's going to be lots of fodder for the mind with that kind of stuff. I don't know a whole lot about ancient Roman magic, but what I do know or what I've seen in some films and things is kind of interesting. So I'd like to see how that plays out. I'm sure you'll do a great job putting it together. So
I was asked there about walk us through character creation. So the character creation is going to be very, very similar from that of like Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire. So you roll for your ability scores, and then you roll for your social class. Of course, the social classes are different, of course, because you got slave, free man, foreigner or provincial, plebeian, wealthy plebeian, equestrian, modest patrician, senatorial patrician. You get background skills based on your social class. Then you have the prior history tables that are obviously geared towards like Roman stuff to some degree, but some of them are similar. You know, there are some that apply in pretty much every case, and then you will end up determining. Well, there's name tables that give the correct way of generating a Roman name if you want to do that. There's then the character classes, and because part of this game presumes that you're Frumentari, and therefore there's a lot of investigative sort of games. There's a mix in the character classes between like characters that are strong adventurers and characters that are more cerebral, right? So you can play. There's an administrator class, which would, you know, somebody who played an administrator would probably be like the lead agent of the Frumentari cell. Barbarian class, it means someone who, you know, was at least raised as a barbarian and is now working for Rome. The fighter class is pretty standard, as you know, very, very similar to the ones in those other games I mentioned. The holy man, which is very similar to the holy man
in Baptism of Fire.
That is from Baptism of Fire. The magus, which is a Roman magician, right? A Greco-Roman magician. The philosopher class, which is basically a scholar, though philosophers could also do some magic.
Did you get some for me too?
There's the pagan priest class for somebody who has the title of one of the various pagan priesthoods. A thief, and then a wilderness scout, right? So those are the classes that you can play, and then you get kitted up, obviously, with you know, Roman gear. The gameplay is going to be very similar to Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire in terms of the basic mechanics. Shelvever says, "Oh yeah, I forgot you have social class rules. I need to dig through those for my future West Marches campaign." All right. Well, I'm glad that you've got the option there to
We have a whole book for that.
That's right.
One of your best sellers too.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. I don't know when. I mean, that game is probably not going to come out for quite a while still. The Roman game, because
that'll. To be honest, I mean, we're looking at. I mean, I don't know. It's going to take, because I'd love to do it.
You've got one other project, don't you?
Well, I've got like 2 or 3 other projects, and that's the problem. Like, I mean, realistically, it might be next spring, you know, but we'll see.
Well,
the problem is I've got another book right after Sons of Heaven that I've told this guy I was going to do a while back, and I've been pushing it, and so that's got to get done. And his book's like 300 or 400 pages. Then Rob Kuntz still has not officially given me, you know, all of the manuscript for his, or the revised manuscript for his thing. So, and we have a contract that he hasn't signed yet. So I don't know. I'm supposed to do his next, but if that kind of falls through, then I could move you up ahead. But you know, it takes several months to get a book out. And that's all I'm saying is, like, you know, so I think Sons of Heaven, like I said, should be out pretty soon here. And then I know I have at least one other project I got to do ahead of the Roman one. So, you know, 6 months maybe.
You want to give the audience any hint of what that other book is? Or is it still on the down low right now?
It's, you know, so Mike Yao is a fellow game designer and LARPer I've known since the 80s. And he came out with a game called Savage Kingdoms, which is a Hyborian style game. It's very much a Conan kind of a setting. And so he's actually, this is like his fourth edition of his book. It came out, I think the first iteration of that was 10 years ago or something. And it was actually him making that book, actually it was probably 15 years ago, it was him making that book that kind of spurred me on to make On Cur. Because I was like, well, if he can do it, I can do it, right? Yeah. And then he's in his fourth edition on that book. And it's, from what I understand, at least I know the first two editions did really well. I haven't really kept up with him over the years as much as I'd like. He moved out of state, and with me being banned on most social media, wasn't able to keep in contact with him until recently. But apparently he's doing well, and he's looking to do a fourth edition, and he wants me to do it. And he's sent me a manuscript, and it's unedited 300 and something pages.
Oh, geez. So
it's a huge one. But as soon as I finish his, I'm good to work on what's next, and whether that's you or
Rob
or Rob Kuntz, it kind of depends on him getting back to me or not. He's a strange fellow, and he doesn't like social media very much. He doesn't give his phone number out. So
yeah,
he calls me occasionally from a private unlisted number and won't give me the number.
Jeez.
And so I just never know when I'm going to get a phone call. And then I might write him an email and he might not respond for 2 months.
Well,
and then he responds with a short one sentence, kind of oh, I'm busy right now, I'll get back to you later, and that's it. So, I don't know. We had all these ambitions of he wanted me to publish like 20 different books of his, and
jeez,
so far hasn't really coalesced into anything. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to send you sometime very soon here the current complete version of the Roman game, and that way you can get a look at it. And if Rob is delaying and you get this other thing out of the way, then then we can talk about how we should split it or not, and figure out whether to remake it as 2 books instead of 1.
Right. Yeah, it's something I'd love to work on. I love Roman stuff. I used to. I've been a historical reenactor for something like, I think it's my 35th year. And, everybody that knows me well knows I do American Civil War, and I've done World War II reenacting in it. But I also used to do ancient Roman stuff. And it was very brief. A guy named Fred Schaller, who was a fellow reenactor from Civil War, and he also did World War II. He created the 10th Legion reenactment unit here in Georgia, and so we all bought armor and everything and dressed up and had the whole setup, but we only went to a couple of like a handful of events within a year, and then he sadly passed away very unexpectedly, and the unit just kind of fell apart. So I don't do it anymore. I sold all my stuff, but it was pretty cool,
I see. Well, we got any other questions or any other comments we want to do? Anything local recently that's been happening in the gaming hobby that you wanted to comment on, Chris?
No, I mean, I don't know. I haven't, I've been, to be honest, I've been working so diligently on the book here lately. I haven't been on, I won't say I haven't been on social media, because if you've seen my posts or whatever, I post every once in a while, but I haven't really been following news that much, hold on just a second, buddy. For now. Thank you. Yeah, I don't, if you want to, is there anything that, like a subject that we could talk about that maybe in chat or?
Well, nobody's posted any questions here.
No.
At the moment. The most recent news that has been coming out is, Wizards of the Coast is at war with its own employees who want to unionize.
Yeah.
And Paizo has decided to downsize about, what would it be now? 12 years too late. So
right.
They're in serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
mostly business stuff.
I mean, both of those things I think have been obviously talked about by plenty of other people.
I've done videos on both of those
on
things.
videos, yeah, that have much larger. Yeah, of course, I don't have a show at all, so but yeah, I don't know what to think. I mean, look, it's a love-hate relationship with the whole WotC thing. I've never liked, Wizards of the Coast to begin with. Even in the early 2000s when they took over, I just, I liked TSR. I kind of resented them, anyway. And I knew even back then that these guys in Seattle were not going to do justice to the game that Gary created. But it was. It wasn't until recently that they really started pushing, kind of these more leftist agendas and everything. And, so am I sad that they, that a lot of the woke staff is going to be on hard times or something with losing their jobs or what? No, but, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily want Wizards of the Coast to, if I want them to fail or not, or just get better, but I don't know that they're going to get better or that is possible. So I don't know.
That is kind of the question, right? Is that the two of the biggest companies, and they're both having some real problems.
Right.
Besides that, has said we're just going to go into the D&D Beyond, and it's going to be a subscription service, and they're going to become like a closed shop.
I mean, they kind of deserve what they get, in that respect.
But the question is, will their failures end up benefiting the OSR and other smaller press, or is it going to actually have a negative effect?
Yeah, well, it's a complicated answer. It's yes and no. In one sense, regular, you want to call mainstream D&D through WotC is the biggest competitor of everyone else, right? So if they're out of the picture, you would think, oh, well, that must be great for you as a small-time publisher. You don't have to compete with this huge multi-million-dollar company, and you'll certainly sell more books. But the problem is losing that company. The hobby then loses the majority of the people that came with it. And so that, whether you like them or not, it is true that WotC increased the population of the people in the hobby, by like 1 million. There's millions of people who play or are at least D&D adjacent. And it's spurred on. I mean, you can see all these YouTube channels and everything that most of which I don't like, but there's certainly a lot of money to be made, and a lot of it's entered pop culture. So losing D&D from pop culture makes it unpopular again. Making it unpopular is going to make there's going to be less people to play the game. Yeah. And so it's going to go back to kind of the way it was in the 70s and 80s, where you only had maybe tens of thousands of people in the world playing.
It's tricky,
so I don't know that that's going to help us sell books.
The last time that D&D really screwed up with fourth edition was when the OSR ended up booming as a result of that, right? So it got better.
I mean, I don't know that, like I said, it's not going to help us sell books, but at the same time, maybe that's okay. I've
noticed this year.
I think the hobby in general would be better off without WotC and all the baggage it brought with it,
Yeah. I noticed this year that there's been a decline, somewhat of a decline in
of
sales.
What? Oh yeah, sales
of my income, right? Of how many people.
Oh yeah.
Are buying something. It's not an enormous decline, but it is a decline. And I don't know if that's because of Wizards or Paizo, or if it's because of the economy. It's hard.
Yeah, I've been kind of wondering too. It's because look, the people that are the staunchest supporters of WotC are not people who play your stuff anyway, right? They're not buying our books, so that shouldn't affect us really in the short term. But I think what it is, though, is everybody who wants to buy Baptism of Fire, for example, or the Last Vikings has already done so. And so, what we need are new products, which is what we're working on now. So, that should alleviate that. But
that's always the case. Yes.
Yeah, you can't just ride on the coattails of Sword and Caravan or something for forever. It's like every once in a while we'll sell, every day we sell a copy or something of that or Social Encounters or something. I see that, but you can't make a living selling one or two books a day. So you got to keep coming out with products.
Well, if you've got like more than 100 products for sale,
yes,
sort of
that's true.
I'm not trying to, I'm not living off of cans of beans or something like that.
Yeah. And that's the idea, that's why I'm so, kind of answering one of the, this goes on to one of the questions somebody asked in chat is, that's one of the reasons I kind of started working with you and continue to do so, is because, it increases my library of stuff to sell as well, right? So, I don't sell that many copies of On Cur. And so, it's just, you got to build up.
Mutually beneficial, of course.
Yeah, mutually beneficial. You got to build up a library.
I just had to reissue, the Pundit files, which were previously on the game website when they shut down. So I'm now reissuing them on drive-through with this guy is he's one of the players of my Sword and Caravan campaign, but he has he had a little publishing thing going on in drive-through, and so he said,
those are great because
the products are already done. He doesn't take any cut from what I did.
Really?
He said, no, I'll just host them for you, right? But his books are now selling faster because people come to buy my books. They say, "Oh, what's this?"
And they see his page, and they see all the other things.
Books and they're selling more too now, right?
Yeah.
So it's
and those are great great products to sell too. Because if I'm not mistaken, you sell them for what, like it's $350.
It was $350 in the Red Room, but because drive-through gets its cut now, it's $450, right? So
oh man,
I would urge everyone to check out the Lixini Gaming site on drive-through. I will just a second. I'm gonna post it. This is the latest one that has come out now. Is Pundit Files 12, which is an adventure called Mendicant. But from there, you can look at all of the current issues.
But I guess only time will tell. I'm not optimistic necessarily that everything's going to work out hunky-dory for the hobby in general. This is, I think eventually WotC is going to fail. I think eventually Paizo is going to fail. And I think there's going to be a huge vacuum. And now whether anybody of any worth is going to fill that vacuum is yet to be seen.
Well,
but I think initially the hobby in general is going to suffer quite a bit, but it might be for the best.
well,
I
what
think
happened
it's
with fourth
it's gonna-
edition, obviously, is that Paizo came in and did a D&D clone Pathfinder, right? And it
Yeah,
were really
yeah.
successful during fourth edition. But besides that, there were people who had played third edition that, but that were looking for something else, and that's where they discovered the OSR, right? So I think that there's
Mhm.
a large percentage of D&D gamers only ever play D&D, right? But and they're probably, if there isn't any D&D that they like, they're just going to stop. But there's another percentage that will look for alternatives that they might not have looked for while they were happy with D&D. So it can depend, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, we've got a couple of questions here. The Bedrock Brendan mentions about the controversy of to roll or not to roll, which, as I understand it, I mean, the part that I saw about this on social media was about how they're talking about, like, should the DM go with whatever is rolled or not. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were talking about there, Brendan, but I guess I'm guessing that's what you're discussing. And of course, my point of view, like I said, in my Sword and Caravan campaign, I do everything on the basis of the random generators. For that to work, you have to have good random generators, right? In any situation where, I mean, you shouldn't do a roll for something that should automatically succeed or automatically fail. Anything else, you should probably go by the roll, because otherwise you're taking the position as a DM of being an author or a movie director, and that never turns out as good as just going with what's generated. Even if it's unusual. The point is that sometimes there will be unusual things that happen. I don't know if you agree, Chris, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't read I missed the part of the question. I had to walk away, but.
Well, he says to roll or not to roll has been getting a lot of conversation on Twitter. It's basically about, like, should DMs, if they get a roll that they think is unfair or something like that, should they?
Well, I wonder though, are they talking about? Does this kind of stem from that video that? What was it? The Critical Role team had put out. There was a video that I even shared on Twitter where they were talking about playing D&D without dice and without books, and they were talking about it was they were going to use it for therapy, and you're supposed to hold hands, and the monsters are just have as much agency as a regular person, and all this. I don't know, but there was quite a bit that went viral on Twitter, and they were talking about not using dice. So I don't know if that ties into this,
maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe I got it wrong, because I saw a different post about that was specific.
But I mean, I agree with you in that sense that as a game master, you really don't want to have to make the players roll for everything. I mean, if it's I typically, especially, like, let's say if you want something as a game master to happen in the game, it's not a good idea to have them roll to see if it happens, because they could roll that it doesn't happen, and then you're unhappy, and now you've got to try to figure out something else to do. Just have that scenario play out, or if you really want to take an approach where everything is truly random, then like you said, roll if you need to, but if it's not necessary, there's quite a bit you could do. Give the players some agency to decide what they would like to do, or you could say something either happens or doesn't. You could just narrate it, I don't know. I think I'm kind of a fan of rules light systems nowadays, but I think the older I get, I just I don't want to read a whole lot of new systems. But
yeah, well, that's
it kind of but it kind of depends. Yeah, I don't know what the context is, so it's a little hard to answer it.
So Drew Enders, I saw your question, if you're still here anyway, but it's something that was already covered by Chris earlier on, so I don't think I'm going to have him recover that. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else here. Drew says, is it important that both agent and empire appear in the title? Well, no, not necessarily. But the idea of the basic concept of Frumentari is that you are secret agents of the empire. So like I don't know. I thought that was a good title at first. So, but this is not. That's not. We're not talking about the sci-fi game there. We're talking about the Roman game. Let me see here. Oda Manjiro says, I'm all caught up on the Pundit files, regrettably. Well, I'm glad you did get all the Pundit files. I'm glad to hear that. Oh, yeah. Bedrock says it does come from the Critical Role video. So I was wrong. You're right. And Joshua says, I think absolutely include Frumentari in the title or subtitle. Yeah. But Frumentari only has one M, by the way. It does have two eyes. You're correct at the end there.
Frumentari.
Well, I guess we've covered pretty much everything, and we're at the 2.5 hour mark. So I think it's a place to stop. I thank you very much for having shown up and doing this live stream, and it's a good way for people to get to hear about what's going to be involved in Sons of Heaven, and which will hopefully be coming out in a month or so, a month to 6 weeks, let's say. We're starting to sound a bit like the Trump administration with the war, but we're going to get a peace deal any moment now.
Yeah, I don't think you are, mate.
That's right. So I guess that's everything for today, guys. Check out the Pundit files if you haven't caught up on all of them, like the great Oda Manjiro has. But check out also all of the games that I have done with Mad Scribe, including Sword and Caravan and its source books like Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, Wilderlands. Also check out Baptism of Fire, and of course the Last Vikings, which until you get your Romans, you can go crazy with Vikings. It's a great book. It's not a full rule book, but you can use it with either Lion and Dragon or Baptism of Fire. It's set in the same time period as Baptism of Fire, so you can definitely use it with that. And of course, you could use it with any other OSR system. So check all that out. And I guess we will see you guys next time. In 4 weeks, I will be back doing the RPG Pundit encounter, assuming that my guest doesn't cancel. And we will see you guys then, I guess. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like the video and share it once it's ready to go. And I guess that's everything, unless you have any final words, Chris.
That's it, man.
Okay. So thank you very much, guys, and we will talk to you soon. We're ending the stream now.